Hey, it's Les from the TV Dudes. This week, as part of our special coverage of Austin Film Festival's 26th year, I was lucky enough to chat with manager and executive Jamie Wager. We talk a little bit about a show he worked on long ago with Delta Burke called Women of the House. But then we get into his own company, Capital Creations, and how he moved into the management and executive side of entertainment. It's a really interesting chat, and I think you'll enjoy. So we talked a little bit off mic. I got excited when I first saw your name because of a show that you were stunned I'd heard of, Women of the House, Delta Burke's comeback vehicle after designing women from years and years ago.
I'm stunned that anyone has heard of that show. Frankly, like I'm stunned when cast members or relatives have heard of that show. But keep going, yeah.
So starting out there and working on that show years ago, to now where you help staff shows.
Right.
Can you talk a bit about what was your career path that you thought you would have then versus what happened?
No, that's a great question, and I could talk for days about that. I'll just say I was a kid who grew up in Washington, D.C., surrounded by politics, who saw it as dysfunctional. It turned out I was kind of right about that. And I just fell in love with television, and I can't even 100% explain why. I just thought the stories were fascinating, and I felt like somehow even they were more relevant than the stuff that I watched on Capitol Hill. And I started to pay a lot of attention to the credits, and particularly the writer credits. My dad was like, I think it's about the writers. Like the actors can go from a good show to a bad show, but like if they're a good writer, they tend to be more involved in other good shows. So my dad's a lawyer and has been involved in government, but that was his key insight into show business, which frankly he was right about. My mom sent me an article when I was in college about a guy named Jeff Sagansky, who was president of CBS. And she said, this guy kind of reminds me of you. And so I was like, wait, you can watch TV for a living? Like, how is that possible? So I got an internship at the ABC affiliate in Providence, Rhode Island, where I went to college, and kicked around in politics for about a year because that was sort of the family business in a way. But, my eyes were like, I want to be Brandon Tartikoff. I want to be Jeff Sagansky. And, my odd connection to it was having worked in politics, that I worked on the presidential inaugural committee in 92, 93, and Harry Thomason and Linda Thomason were the heads of the inaugural committee. And, you don't think you're going to make like great Hollywood connections working on an inaugural, but that's what happened to me. And I worked for Harry and Linda, and they were the first show business people that I had ever met in my life. Growing up in Washington, it was like everyone was a lawyer. And so I was like, wow, like show business people. And Linda Bloodworth Thomason is, to this day, as funny a person to talk to as I have ever met. I mean, there are a lot of comedy writers who aren't funny when you talk to them. They're funny on the page. Like, Linda is, like, she was funny. Every sentence out of her mouth was funny for like 25 or 30 minutes in a row. I couldn't believe it. Like, I hurt from laughing so hard. But I was like, I loved, half hours. My favorites were like, Cheers and Family Ties and The Wonder Years. And I was like, Linda Bloodworth, who's sort of a Hall of Fame writer, was the first actual TV comedy writer I had ever met. And she was funny every second. And I was like, this is fantastic. And, when politics sort of went sideways for me, I just decided I was going to come out to LA and work for Harry and Linda. And they had a number of shows up at that point. Designing Women had ended. Evening Shade with, Burt Reynolds and Charles Durning and Mary Lou Henner was up, and that was Burt was going through his divorce, and so there was a lot of attention on that show. And they had Hearts of Fire, where I spent most of my time with John Ritter and Marky Post, and a little-known actor named Billy Bob Thornton and Conchata Ferrell, who go on to do a lot of other stuff and had done some great stuff. And like, I was just so excited to be on a set. I came out here, I called Harry, he's like, I think I got a job for you, and I was doing production and publicity work for them. And like, I was a history major, like I didn't know anything. Like, I thought that a director of photography was somebody who was responsible for an Instamatic on a set. Like, just the sign, like there's a sign as you're getting off 101 to go to CBS Radford, it says, studio, it says like Laurel Canyon Studio City. And I was just like, it's a city of studios, which it's not. But I was just excited by a traffic sign. Like, that's how in love with television I was. And, I was lucky enough for Harry and Linda to hire me. And it was, it was the greatest first job because I had some responsibilities on the set. I did some publicity stuff for them, which allowed me to interact with the cast a little bit. But like, I got to learn. Like, I learned what a director of photography actually does. Like, I learned what a costumer and a set dresser and like how they can all kind of add to the sort of the theme and the story of the piece. And it was, it was just, I still feel so lucky to have started there and to kind of see and watch a show get made every week. And I thought that I still thought I wanted to be Jeff Sagansky, or Brandon Tartikoff. So I was like, okay, I want to go and sort of work in an executive capacity. My first job was working at Columbia TriStar, in their ratings division, sort of doing Excel spreadsheets and getting all the ratings every morning and analyzing them for the studio. And then I worked, for a lit agency, called Broder, Curlin, Webb, Uffner, and they had they represented Jim Burrows, and they represented, Chris Carter and, Barry Kemp, who created Coach, and, just a whole bunch of really wonderful, top-notch writers. And so I got to learn a little bit about the representation side of the business and how a good advocate is so important for a writer, to sort of help them navigate the maze of show business, and to sort of warn them of like where the potholes are. And I was like, wow, this was good. And if a client took off, that could mean great things financially for a writer. But I still thought I wanted to be an executive. And so I interviewed for some jobs, and with some support from the agency. My first job, I was a current programming exec at the WB network. I started in late '97, which was a really fun time to be there. Buffy was taking off. They'd bought the script for Felicity. Dawson's Creek was going to premiere in a couple of months. And so it was really exciting. So current programming, in case people want to know, you're not hearing pitches for new shows, but you're hearing pitches for sort of episodes of shows that are already on the air. You're help guiding those shows in a way that the network thinks is the right one. Sort of, what are the right storylines? You help with scheduling episodes. Okay, we're going to do an original this week or a repeat that week. It was like, of all the jobs I've had in show business, like that was such an incredibly exciting time because the network was taking off, and we were putting people on our air who were going from, unknowns to movie stars in a matter of months. So that was, really, really exciting. I can get to the end of how did I get to where I am now, or do you want to, if you have anything that you wanted to?
Well, that was exactly what I was going to ask. Is at what point or what were you seeing then that made you decide, instead of being head of CBS or whatever,
right.
Instead I want to start Capital Creations Management?
I mean, to be 100% honest, like it wasn't all my decision. I just learned that, my personality, I can be kind of impatient. And I think, to work at a corporation, you have to be patient and you have to sort of say like, okay, I don't believe in this, but, hopefully I'll get the next one. And one of the things that I learned about myself is like, I'm at my best when I'm really 100% believing in things, and that, sometimes like compromise is important, but if I didn't believe in the writer, I wasn't so great an executive on the show. And I just found that like it's important for me, to be an 100% believer. At the same time, when you're working at a network, you're getting scripts from every agent in town saying, hey, this is a writer who you should be aware of to staff for your next show, to staff for the next season for the show. And so, sort of there was this time in staffing season, which was like kind of February to April, like you'd get hundreds of scripts. And I liked getting all these scripts and sort of saying like, I think this person's right for this show, or that person's right for that show, or this is somebody who's really great. We have to get this person on staff. And a lot of the people that I was finding who were cold and unemployed, and I'd help them get a meeting with with a showrunner or with a new agent or whatever, and like their career would completely take off. And it happened a bunch of times that I was finding these really cold writers, and then helping them revive their careers, and it just everything about it kind of made me happy. And so it just sort of seemed like, my bosses weren't always agreeing with what I was saying when I was working at the network, but, and at the studio, but I really I loved finding unemployed people and kind of helping them get through the maze. I have one funny story if you have 2 minutes. So there's this one writer I met, it was probably 1999, and he wrote a Larry Sanders spec, and it really stood out to me. He had really crummy credits at that point. I think he's on Living in Captivity or some show. It's not even on his resume anymore. But I was so sure. I was like, I gave it to somebody else in the office. I was like, I need somebody else to meet this person because I really think this is a special script. It was a spec Larry Sanders, and we met in his office. And this guy, he was from LA. And it was just like a wonderful, glorious 2-hour meeting. And I was covering a show called Movie Stars with Harry Hamlin. And I said, I really think you'd be right for Movie Stars. He said that'd be great. He left, but it was like we both knew this was a fun, memorable meeting. I sent the script to Movie Stars. The showrunner did not respond. He did not get a job. But he did get other jobs. And so I'll say cut to, it was 10 years later. It was January of 2008. And his show about an advertising agency in 1960s Manhattan had just won the Golden Globe. And I was very excited. Somehow I got this invitation. They were having this beautiful party at the Chateau Marmont, which is this beautiful old hotel in Hollywood. And I went up to Matt Weiner and I said, "Hey, Matt, I don't know if you remember me. I'm Jamie Wager, and we had a meeting." And he stopped me and he goes, and his show had just won the Golden Globe, and he said, "Jamie, of course I remember you. Why didn't I get that job on Movie Stars?" I mean, right? And it was like, it had been 10 years. You just won the Golden Globe. And it was like it had happened 10 minutes ago. He was still great. Smarting. And it's like, the lesson is writers remember. If you're good to writers, if you're bad. And I sort of have tried to say, Matt, I really tried to get you the job and I sent the script there and the showrunner just didn't respond or whatever. But I do feel like that's a little bit of a claim to fame for me that, when Matt was a really, really, really cold writer, I brought him in for a meeting off of a spec Larry Sanders, and he did okay. That show about the advertising execs in Manhattan in the 60s, I think a few people watched that. Yeah. So there you go.
And you got to know that somewhere right now there's a kid going, "Hey, why didn't I ever get that job on Mad Men?"
And I hope, Matt Weiner, I hope you meet that kid and yes. He busts your chops at a party 10 years from now. I hope that happens to you.
Well, Jamie, thank you so much for talking to me about all this and going back down memory lane for the shows. Really enjoyed getting to chat with you.
Great.
The TV Dudes is an independently run podcast and a member of the Electric Sweater Podcast Network. We are exclusively listener supported. If you'd like to help us out, go to patreon.com/tvdudes. You can like us on Facebook and Twitter at TV Dudes. All the music for our show is by our friend and original TV dude, Gregory J. Amani Smith. To find out more about us, go to thetvdudes.com and electricsweater.com. I'm Grant Davis. Thanks for listening.